We're headed for 1 Kings 17, those of you staying here in the auditorium. 1 Kings 17 is where we're going. Hey, I forgot to mention, we're doing a new song today. It's in your bulletin, but if you didn't get a bulletin, make sure you pick up. It's a full page of music, so you want to grab that. It's in the bulletin. If you already grabbed that song sheet, you'll get two of them today. Mary can say, while you're turning in 1 Kings 17, let's do this one. What do people do when they are bored? Eat? Sleep? Yeah, okay, you said several of them. Take a nap, read a book, play video games. Number 2 was watch TV. Eat's not number 1. It's that taking naps there, yeah. Number 1. Anybody know? They continue to listen to the sermon. Okay, so we will put the two to the test this morning and see how you do, okay? Name an occupation begins with the letter J. Janitor, judge. Is that it? Got any others? Jockey. Okay, here we go. They said juggler, journalist, jockey, jeweler, judge, justice, janitor was number 1. Here we go. Name something people deliver for a livelihood. Babies are going to be there. Mail is going to be there. Food, pizza, here. Babies, furniture, packages, flowers, pizza, newspapers. Number 1 is mail. Name something you might eat with crackers. I don't know why I'm talking about food. I'm just going to enhance your hunger this morning. Soup is there. Cheese is there. Okay, here we go. Sliced meats, chili, peanut butter, cheese, and number 1 was soup. Name something kids love to jump on. Yeah. Parents are going to be there, or I think. Okay. Bed is there. Trampoline is, I don't remember. Each other, here we go. Other kids, parents, pile of leaves, couch, trampoline, and number 1 was their bed. Name, okay, there's a reason why I did this. You'll see it, you'll see in a moment. Here's the question. Name a food item that you would lick. Ice cream. Lollipop, ice cream. What's it? Coke. Not me, buddy. No. Okay, I want you to catch the answers. The question was name a food item, an envelope. How many people eat an envelope, right? Then they had popsicle, lollipop. Number 2 answer, a stamp. How many? I mean, yes. Do you lick them? Yeah. Do you put the stamps on your soup?
So what's the difference?
Ice cream is number 1. Okay, so that got me thinking. We need to listen. We need to make sure that when we study the Bible, we're getting it right. Yes? No? Okay, that we rightly divide or accurately divide the word of truth. So part of what we've designed here is from little kids on, we want to be teaching the word of God and not just filling with repetitive stories, but teaching the whole counsel of God. It's good to have repetitive stories, but you can only do Goliath not every week in a child's life. And so our whole design in the Calvary Clubs and the TNT is to train, and part of it is to train the people in rightly dividing, knowing doctrine, and being able to understand. And so part of it is periodically we do character studies. And the character study we're doing now is Elijah. What do we know about Elijah? Let me just back up and where we've been the last 2 weeks. He's said to be a man of like passions like us. That's the New Testament commentary on. And so he's this ordinary guy who God uses in an extraordinary way. He's working and ministering in northern Israel, which is a really apostate group of the 10 tribes of Israel that had gone way wicked and basically have gotten away from Jehovah worship and turned mostly to Baal worship. And so when he's introduced, he comes, and the first thing we know about him, he approaches the king and the king anyway, and he says, before him, God's going to bring a drought upon the land, which fits the Old Testament narrative that said, if you follow me, I'll bless you with rain early and latter. If you don't follow me, I'll hold the rain. And so you'll suffer in an agrarian society. That would be bad. And he says, it's going to stay until I pray and it comes back, and it's not going to happen until a nation repents. After that, God directed him to go to a certain place in the wilderness. Where was it? It's by a creek, by the brook of Kerith, or Cherith, however you want to say it in the English. So he directs him to go by the brook Kerith. And God says, I'm going to take care of you. The king is going to start a manhunt. We read about that later on. The king's trying to get Elijah to bring him back to call off the drought, to re-pray, as if that's going to happen. But the king's got this manhunt going. God sends him into a wilderness region, and how's he going to provide for him? Okay, he's got the brook that he's going to provide, and he's got the birds that he's going to have bring him food. So God in his wisdom takes him to this remote area where he's protected and he's provided for. And while he's there, as we read in this story, everything's going well. And again, we don't know how long he's there. Do you remember what I said last week, what scholars basically who do the studies of time, what they think he's there? About a year, which plays into this quite a bit. And so the birds are bringing him food, but then we read in 1 Kings 17 that it sounds like everything's being taken care of. And then it says, it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up because there had been no rain. Why is there no rain? He's been praying for no rain, and as a result of his prayer, he runs out of water like everybody else. And so he's got to, something's got to happen. And so we'll get to that something in a minute, but let me just stop right there. Do you remember what Kerith means? The word itself. Did you write in your Bible? It means to whittle. It means to hone down, sand something off. And so and again, names mean something in these stories, especially in the Old Testament. Names give you circumstances. And so Kerith means this whittling where God is dealing with him. And we made these observations last time that there's several areas, and you could have expanded upon, maybe you did in your personal study to follow up, but I was pointing out that there's several areas that he needs to be growing. And the reason I'm saying this, he's a man subject unto like passions as we are. So my point is, even though he's got great faith, he's very bold, God says he's like us, which leads me to the conclusion, does he have room for growth? In other words, do you have room for growth? Yeah, you don't. Good answer. We all do. We all do. So what could God be dealing with him? We pointed out these things that God was announcing him, was teaching him. I'm interested not only the nation, but also you as an individual, that you need to trust me for the directions. Even though I'm sending you into a protected place and your provisions are there, it's going to run out. You still need to trust me. You need to be having confidence. And God will provide for us. Servants to remember just trusting God day by day, which is, we pointed out, it's hard for us to do the day by day because we're used to having food stocked. We panic if our freezer is running low, which is for extra. But back in Bible days, you were told to trust. How did Israel have to trust for their food? When they're in the wilderness. Manna, which came, could they store it up? No. So that idea, servants need to trust even if it meets only the daily needs. Servants need to trust even if God is redirecting paths. And so this does happen. Sometimes God says, go to the king, and then he says, now leave the king and go to Kerith. And then he says, I want you to leave Kerith. Sometimes God shifts our place of opportunity and ministry. There's nothing wrong with that as God is lead. We said this about attitude. Attitude is, everything seems to point to me, he is a more type A personality. He's used to confrontation, being bold, and now he has to just go and sit for a year in the wilderness and not preach. I would go nuts, okay? And so he's got to be quiet, and this is a time of learning to be content with what God provides. See, none of us ever struggle with this. None of us ever have a struggle with what God provides and being content, because we're always happy with whatever God provides. Okay, so he needed to learn that. He learned to be patient with God's timing. I think this, and it's, to me it's there because it's in other stories. It makes sense. Do you think, looking at your life, and you have a good walk with the Lord, is there still room for improvement in your personal walk with the Lord? Yes or no? Okay. So do you think that God would say, Elijah, you still have some room for improvement in that area? Right? Right? Okay, so could this, part of this sitting in the wilderness, waiting to see what happens, could this be a time of God whittling him and just bringing him closer to the Lord? Now, I mentioned last time he's kind of isolated. The birds are coming, and there's a possibility that the birds were used almost like a pet, if I can use that example, not to that full extent, but the birds provide some type of living companionship that you could talk to. Rather than the volleyball, when you're stranded on an island, you get to talk to a crow that comes twice a day. Okay? Who else could this believer talk to? God, in a real sense. And so it may be God is whittling his prayer life, because is he going to need to really have confidence in prayer later on? Yeah, because what does he do later on? He has that contest with the prophets of Baal. And he says the contest is who can call down fire from heaven. And you're going to see something happen in the next story that is going to be absolutely remarkable, that he's going to have real faith in prayer for what he's going to ask God. Anyway, so the point is, did God put other servants in solitary confinement to whittle their walk with him? Can you think of some? Think of some that were just, they had an extended period of time of them and God. John, you're talking John the Baptist? Yeah, John the Baptist was a wilderness guy. Okay. Anybody else that you can think of? Okay. Moses did how many years in the wilderness? Even though, did he know God was calling him to deliver the nation? Acts 7. Remember when we were preaching through Acts 7? You don't remember. Okay. Acts 7 says that he knew he was to be the deliverer, and that's why he attacked and defended the Hebrew that was being attacked by the guard, because he thought the people would understand he's the deliverer. But he was doing God's work the wrong way, whatever, and wrong timing and all. And so God puts him in the backside of the wilderness for 40 years. Can you think of anybody else that went into a wilderness situation? Jesus did. How many days is he in the wilderness? 40 days? Okay. There's another guy. Okay. Oh, yeah. He's in Patmos. He's there. I thought you were going to say the guy we're studying so much in the book of Acts. Do you know who we're studying a lot in the book of Acts? Now, he's leading the second missionary journey. He was working with Barnabas. His name used to be Saul. Okay. What happened to him when he first gets saved? He is put basically in a wilderness area for 7 years when you start reading his story and get all the different things. And so there's that very good possibility that sometimes that isolation is really good, or that being put aside and just be still and know that I'm God. And so this happens to him, and it's no surprise, because he's going to need it. He's going to use it, then he's going to grow, and he's realizing that just being busy for God isn't always the best. Sometimes we get so busy in the work of the Lord, we forget the Lord of the work. And I think most of us have had that experience in our life, that sometimes we've just got too preoccupied and serving God that we forgot to spend time with God. And so he has that happen. It reminded me when we were, one of our multiple trips to to Portugal, we would take the teens and we'd go to the border of Portugal and Spain. Some of you who were on those trips, you remember this. This was a bridge that was, this one was done by Tiberius, and the signs are still there, and they still use this walkway, or this traffic way. Well, down the road a little bit, there's another aqueduct that was built in 109 AD by the Romans, and it's in the city of Sagonia. And they used the aqueduct system for years until 1909. Built in 109, in 1909 they decided we are going to change and go to a different type of water delivery system. And once they did, and they shifted, and we're no longer running the water through the aqueduct system, guess what started happening to the aqueduct? It started deteriorating because there was no moisture there. And after a period of time, they realized, wait a minute, we're damaging it by not letting the water run through it like it was designed. I wonder how many times we start breaking down because we're not letting the Spirit of God run through us in prayer. Yeah, and so it happens to us that we start crumbling. And so you and I, we can look and say, okay, what might we do to improve on our prayer life? Okay, now I just threw several suggestions, okay? Maybe increase the time of prayer, maybe designate a fasting time, maybe increase your Bible reading to just get closer to the Lord for every so often. Doesn't have to be every day, but periodically set aside a day that you're going to spend a little bit more time getting together with others. We have that special prayer meeting on Wednesday night. What an ideal time, an opportune time for you to get together and just pray with others for, by the time you pray, it's usually about 40 minutes because we go from like 7 to 8 o'clock, but just praying with others and sharing is just really, really, really important and critical to just bolster your prayer time, which quite frankly, I think all of us can always use a good oomph periodically in those areas. So God's dealing with them. The brook is drying up, and the last we stopped, we have no news. It says there's no rain. But then we read verse 8. The word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get you to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. So he arose and went to Zarephath. This is really, really, really interesting. Okay, God tells him to go, and he says, go to Zarephath. And in the Hebrew, it has this idea, get up now. It's like you with the kids, you know, when school morning, and you're saying, you got to get up now. We're leaving. And there's a sense of urgency. Let's move it. And that's in this sense, go right away, get moving. And when Jesus talks about this years later, it gives us a little bit more insight into how bad it is that God is sending him out of country. You see, Zarephath is not in northern Israel. It's in Sidon, S-I-D-O-N, or Z in the King James, that he goes. And what's interesting is when Jesus talks about it, he says there was many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, but why didn't God send him to those widows? God sends Elijah to Zarephath. In this context, the previous verses, Jesus says, a prophet is without honor in his own country. He's talking, this is what he says when he's preaching at the town of Nazareth, and he's preaching to his hometown friends and family. And as he's preaching, he declares by saying, this day is the word of God fulfilled. He doesn't say it point blank, but he's saying it subtly, I'm the Messiah. How does his family friends from Nazareth, how did they respond? Yeah, their initial is, how can this be? He's the carpenter's son. And then he talks about, hey, wait a minute. He says, a prophet's without honor. And even Elijah, he was sent out of Israel rather than to Israel because basically the only place that there was going to be a widow of faith was in Zarephath. And by the way, when he's talking to the Nazarenes and he says these things, they get really, really upset with him. Do you remember what they want to do to him? They give an invitation. They come forward. They grab him. And they want to take it. They take them to the cliffside. They're going to throw him over the cliff because they're really upset that he busted on them as Jews for not having faith. But he's going back to a story. There's a story that he says that all the way Elijah. Remember, Elijah's one of their heroic prophets, one of the top few. And so he's talking in this passage, and he's implying and supporting the idea there weren't many people of faith, not even the widows, who typically you would think that, the widow woman, they were the ones who would rely upon Jehovah because they had nobody else. And he's saying there wasn't that. That's how bad the northern tribes had become. He says that God sends Elijah out of country, not just for that reason, but there's other reasons that we'll see here in the next minute. He immediately obeys, and he goes. But to me, and maybe you have it already marked in your Bible, to me, the context, the background, this is going to be a big step for him. This is a step of faith. Yes, he was at Kerith, and the birds took care of him, and he was in the wilderness being protected. But telling him to go from Kerith to Zarephath, whoa, this was big time test of faith. Here's the reasons I say it, okay? That you may want to mark down. Zarephath, anybody have a footnote what Zarephath means? That's what it is. Okay, it's crucible. What do you use a crucible for? Okay, it's metal. You're testing the metal. You put it under fire, and you're getting rid of the dross. Now, wait a minute. You're Elijah. God had sent you to a whittling place. Now God is saying, I want you to go to even a harder place. By the title of it, you were in the frying pan. Now I want you to, yeah. And so he's sending him, which if you're a Hebrew and hearing this, you're going, what? Okay, this is a test of faith. Remember, we just talked about it. And he's going to have to travel 75 to 100 miles. Remember, there's a drought through this whole region. Would that pose a problem, traveling? Yes, no? Okay. When he's traveling 75 to 100 miles, who's looking for him? The king has soldiers everywhere. So coming out of the ravines in the wilderness, what's the possibilities here? He's out in the open. Okay, so he's out in the open after hunting him, and Zidon is not Jewish territory. God is telling him to leave the promised land, which, by the way, is very apostate, but he leave this and go into Gentile territory. And remember, you're a Jew. You say he's an Orthodox Jew. You don't want to leave the promised land, number one, and you're going to have to rely upon a Gentile to make provisions? Oh, okay, let's add to it. What does he describe this woman as? He's told she's a what? She's a widow. What does that tell you? What's that? She probably has nothing. Or if she has something, she's typically widows weren't over. Well, he doesn't get all the details, so maybe in the back of his mind he's thinking there's a wealthy widow. But that's not the case normally. And so he's told to go there. You've got to add this to it. There's a king in Zidon. His name is Ethbaal. Who's he related to? You got to go back to chapter 16. You got to find out who his relative is. I hope I gave you the right reference. In chapter 16, verse 31, Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took to, it says, it's talking about Ahab. Ahab, it was a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam. He took to wife, what's her name? Jezebel, okay, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidon. So he's telling him to go to Jezebel's hometown. Really? Really? I have to go and hide out in Jezebel's backyard? Surely Ethbaal is going to favor who? His daughter and her husband. He's basically being told to go into blank territory, enemy territory, and hide there with a widow. Can anything in this story get more negative for him in the circumstances that he's going and he's told a widow's going to sustain you? Wouldn't you jump on board with saying, hey, this sounds like a great idea? Okay, so it would cause most of us, with a little bit of sense, it would cause us to pause and go, really, God? Really? This is what you're doing? And so what happens is, this is the amazing part, he obeys right away and he heads for Zarephath. There's trust. There is real faith in this one. There's probably a lot of praying going on too, that as he's going. And when you think it through, why does he go? I'm going to give you 3 reasons that I think he goes. Number 1, he thinks this: God knows what's best for me in any and all trials. This is trust. This is what you and I, if we're trusting God, God knows what's best for me in any trial. How could Zarephath really be a good place to go hide? Why not? It'd be foolish for him to be there. Of all places, he's not going to be, is in a Gentile's area, because he's so Jewish. He's not going to be in Gentile, and especially Jezebel's hometown. It's he's going to get turned in right away. So hiding in plain view. Isn't that amazing? Isn't there some wisdom in this? Yeah, that God's doing this. Outside of the Israel, remember, there's the manhunt. And it's a coastal town. So there's no problem with water. Okay? There's no problem. There's going to be, and he says to the woman right away when he comes into the town, he says, give me a drink. And she doesn't say, oh, we have a drought going on. Okay, they're not affected the same way. Now, the territory he travels through, yes. And since it's a coastal town and it's a port city, you're going to have a lot of people in and out of the town. Travelers, pirates, merchants. They're going to begin. So they're used to seeing strange faces. Does that make sense that he could blend in with people going in and out and not be, I don't mean it in a bad way. How would you hide in Ono? Okay. Right under the nose. But if everybody knows everybody, that makes it worse, right? That's like my hometown, Pierce. Anybody who came in for just a day, they knew they were a stranger because they stuck out. Because nobody came to Pierce. It was just the Piersites. That's all the ones who were there. So he's going to a city that actually he could blend in, and nobody would expect him under the nose. And he goes to a widow, and he says that he goes into her loft. When the son is sick, he takes the boy up into the loft. The word is alea. It means the rented room. So this widow has a room in her house that she's been renting out. So would it stand out to the neighbors if Elijah were to come and be in the room? Like, she's got some guy in that room, in that house. They wouldn't think anything of it because this is what she's been doing. Can you see wisdom in this? The challenge, and yet had God thought it through. Yeah, and so, and again, he doesn't know all the details. He just knows it's a widow. And he doesn't know she has an alea. He doesn't, but God is in his wisdom taking him there. And so then he's trusting that God knows what's best for me. Is this a challenge for you and I to remember? Does God know what's best for me? When he changes my job, when he decreases my income, when the refrigerator stops fridging, okay? When all of a sudden there's something that I wasn't planning on goes wrong, does God know about what he's doing? The answer is he always knows what's best for us. And so we move on and say, okay, there's a second thought here that's important. Elijah must have believed God knows how to best provide for me. Not only what's best for me in providing protection, but in my provisions. God must know what's best in providing for me in any and all trials. Now, we're going from protection to provisions here. And with that in mind, the way God provides is really abnormal. How so? How is it abnormal when God says a widow will provide for you? Yeah, okay. So, and then watch the story. Okay, arise, get to Zarephath, as I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a woman was there gathering of sticks. Any of you have a different rendering or a footnote with that? She's gathering sticks. Typically, what does he mean by the city gate? Not typically. Not typically. The city gate, what goes on at the city gates? That's where the business takes place. Okay, that's where people are there. That's where the judges are. That's where the marketplace typically is. Okay, when it says she's gathering sticks, what is, and some suggest this strongly, what could she be doing at the city gates? I think I heard it. She's begging for the sticks. She's begging because she's so desperate here that she could be maybe she is gathering them. What it means by gathering is literally, but the word that's used in the original, she's just trying to get sticks. We don't know what that quite means, but there's a possibility that she's there. And it goes on a little bit further, and we this woman who's going to provide for Elijah. Watch what he says. She's gathering sticks, and he says, "Fetch." He's Pennsylvania Dutch. You see it? Fetch me. Okay. Fetch me, he says, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she's going to fetch it, he called to her and said, bring me, he says, I pray or beg you, a morsel of bread in your hand. And she turns and says, medium, well done, rare. No, she turns and says, as the Lord thy God lives, I don't have any cake. I just have a handful of meal in a barrel and a little oil in the cruse, and I'm gathering 2 sticks that I may go in and cook the meal for me that we may eat it, and isn't that encouraging? God just sent you to a widow who is ready to die by starvation. And so this is really an abnormal provision that God makes, okay? Because one, she's a Gentile woman. You've already said it. She's a widow. Plus, then we get the information. There's just her and her boy, and they've got real little. And so God's going to provide for them. Okay, how bad off is the widow? Well, we already read it. She has on her last sandwich. She's destitute, ready to eat her last, and resigned. We're going to die. Okay, we're gonna be gone within the next day or two. Obviously, she's exhausted all of her other options. She's at the gate, possibly begging. Most of us would not expect her to be the source of the prophet's provisions. I think that's fair to say. If we were sending him, we would say, don't go to the widow at the gate collecting sticks. Find somebody else. And so, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to come to that. Okay, that's some of the key here. Some of the key is her statement. He believed God directed him. Okay, he knows God directed him to her, because what he says to her is basically when he says, the Lord God, thus says the Lord God of Israel, and he gives her the information. So God has given him more than what we have heard up to this point, and so he. Telling her that basically God's going to provide. Now, here's what I find interesting. In reading different books on this one, people say, oh, how terrible, unselfish was the prophet. He's asking a widow woman to give him her last bit of food. How terrible. See, this shows you how awful the men of God were, and how really rude the Bible can be. And how do we respond to that? He's following the Lord's leading, okay? It's a different culture, okay? Let's start there, okay? When you say it's a different culture, what do you mean by that? I'm going to make sure we're thinking the same thing. We don't understand it to that degree. Could you say no if you were personally approached and asked? No. Could you say no to another person back in those cultures? If I came up and said, I am a traveler, I am hungry, would you please provide me a meal? would Mike have to take me down to Longhorn Steakhouse and give me
How about McDonald's?
McDonald's? That's still pretty good. In that culture, did she have was it ingrained, you don't have to? Or was it ingrained, you have to? Okay, obligation. We don't have that. We don't have that. And some of our missionaries who, when you talk with them, they say that in these foreign countries, the people seek to please you. They will never tell you no. Do we operate that way? No, we don't. We're not as ingrained, and it doesn't mean we're bad. Okay, we in our culture, we can say no or take a rain check. It's a whole different ball game. So she's living in a different culture. So him asking is not that vulgar. From an American point of view, yeah, but he's not living in 2024 in America. He's living back there in an era where there's a city where it would be better and safer to ask an individual than to go to the public place for provision, because the public place is probably going to get robbed. And so it's different. And he had some words from God. And is this, when he says, get me something, is this a test? Basically, like, lady, let's see if you're going to follow through with what faith. God told me to ask you. Let's see if you're going to follow through. And she does display some faith because she makes that statement at the when she's talking to him. And I want you to look at verse 12. She says, as the Lord thy God lives. What is unusual about Lord in your Bible? It's all caps, which means she's using what name? Yahweh. She's using Yahweh Jehovah. This is a Gentile woman who's talking about Jehovah is alive. Now, he's your God, but she's recognizing he's alive. Who hasn't recognized it at chapter 17, verse 1? King Ahab and the Jews. They have, that's the message that the prophet has, as the Lord God of Israel lives, and they've been denying him. This Gentile woman acknowledges Jehovah. So there's some semblance of some understanding and some faith in her life. And she's asked, basically, don't fear the Lord. Just trust. And he says, stop fearing, verse 13, go and do what I have said, and bring it, da-da-da-da-da-da. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste. And he says, God will provide, and he'll set until he sends the rain. And verse 15, what does she do? When he's saying, here's what God has said, feed me and you won't run out of food. And what does the woman do? She does what he's asking, which what does that display to you? She has some semblance of faith that she's going to go and move forward. So the wisdom of God in providing, okay, is in the next couple verses that you have this. The barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil. I want you to understand something here. He's using two different words in the original. And in the original, the barrel is like the large urn, and then the other one is a smaller thing. So she's got two containers there that he's identifying, that they're different levels, and some may have held flour, wheat, some of it may have held the oils, and I'm not sure. But he's talking, and he's saying that it's not going to waste or end, is the word, and the oil will not fail. There's not going to be any lack of it, is the word. And so the promise is God's going to provide. How did God do this? Well, what I mean by that is, I know he did it because he can do miracles. How did this exactly happen? Did she put her hand in and there was always something at the bottom, or it was overflowing? We don't know. We don't know. How did Jesus do the loaves of fishes? We don't know. Just as they were passing it out, I mean, did they grab one and hand it to him? And another one's right there. We don't know exactly how it worked out, but God did it. And God did it because of God. And so the answer is the provisions were just what was needed when it was needed. That's all we know. We don't know how much of an overflow it was needed, extended. Here to me is great wisdom on the Lord God's part. Enough to meet all their needs, yet not raise suspicion of others. Isn't that clever of God? To just provide what they needed, but all of a sudden she didn't have to build a barn out back because it was so full. If she built a barn out back because it was so full, would that have drawn attention? Yeah, people would notice. And so enough to trust and enough to keep them trusting day by day. What was the wisdom of providing manna? It was having them do what? Trust day by day by day by day. Did it get easier when every day went by and you had the experience? Yeah, but there is great wisdom in sometimes God leaving us where we have to run to Him for our needs. Because if we don't have to run to Him for our needs, we don't run to Him as much. We don't exercise it as much. And so sometimes there are some of us in this room that say, why didn't you make me so wealthy? Why couldn't I have been born in the Trump family and inherited everything? Okay? Because God, in some of our lives, God needs us to run to Him for our needs, to just provide just on a regular basis. So the beauty of God. Why did God, and here's a question that some have asked. Why did God meet her needs? She's a Gentile woman. She's living in the land. She's living in the capital of Baalism. Why would God, if she really believed in Jehovah, she should have migrated to Israel. And so the answer is, hey, wait a minute. She had a belief in the Lord. She calls Him by name. She believes in what Elijah says to her. She's generous with what she has. That's profound. Okay? She's generous in what she had. She even later on, when her son gets sick, she says, have you come to call my sin to remembrance? What does that tell you about her? There's a sensitivity that when things went wrong, she's examining her own heart. There's a spiritual sensitivity. Don't you wish more people had a sensitivity that when things go wrong, they would first of all examine their own heart? Typically, what do people want to do when things go wrong? Blame others, find fault, God, why did you? Instead of self-examination. She has that capability. The strongest evidence that this woman is trusting is, I didn't put it up yet. She houses a hunted man. What's the risk to her? Yeah. So she's doing this, and she knows who he is. You're the man of God, the Lord your God, as he lives. So she knows that this guy is not one of them, and in her community, it's one of her fellow believers, if we can put it that way. So it's amazing that God cares for His kids no matter where they are. And the reason I said it's important, because if you lived back, now this is important because when Jesus is teaching in His ministry, it doesn't impact the same. But in Jesus' day, and even in this Old Testament era, what did they believe about locality and gods? Gods were limited to their territory, their location. So you had the God of Hershey, the God of Lebanon, the God of Myerstown. And what is this saying about Jehovah God? It doesn't make a difference. Even in a land where they don't worship me, I am still, I'm powerful, I'm God, I can do a work of God. Some places like where you work, some of you work in places that are real decadent, really bad. And you say you feel like you walk in and it's like spiritual darkness, whammo, in your face. It's a lot different than when you walk in this room. But you say, is God still able to work in the darkened areas? Yeah. And so it's a beautiful display here, and I need to move on just for this. Question is, are we trusting God for His provisions for us? And showing even a charitableness with what limited provisions God makes, and we can talk about all these applications. Let me get to this last thought. God knows what's best. God knows how best to provide for me. God knows how best to use me. Even in a trial. Can God use me in a trial? I'm not going to get through this, and it ties to the Sunday sermon so well. It came to pass that after these things, the son of the woman, the mistress, and by the way, does anybody have a note how long he stayed here? You know why you don't have a note? Okay, we don't know. The kid falls sick. How bad's the sickness? Okay, the kid dies. Okay, when the kid dies, does mom get upset? Does she? You really? She just, it's okay? No, look at verse 18. Yeah, she says to Elijah, what have I to do with you, O thou man of God? Are you come to call my sin into remembrance and to slay my son? It sounds like a broken-hearted mom that's really upset that her kid died. Okay, because what? Yeah, I think it's reasonable for her to have an initial reaction. Yeah, but what my point is that this woman, she's, here, make a comparison. Was she ready to die earlier? With who? With her son. Why is she upset now? Okay. Now they would be separate. Does that make sense? I don't mind. I do mind the process. But I wouldn't mind if my whole family went together at one time, as much as if the Lord takes Deb. I'd rather the rapture. I don't know about you. I'd rather everybody go. Okay. But this time she's really upset about it, even though she have. And so we move on. Here's my point. His crucible becomes his classroom. Does God ever put you in a crucible that he's going to use you? That you can use to teach other people? Yes, no? We resist our trials, but can this trial help me to teach somebody else? And so this is what happens here. This woman is really upset. Her son's ill. We read about he's really dead before they were going to die, that God had said the prophet would provide. Okay, but add as well, let's add to this. Has she been doing good by providing for the prophet? Serving God? Yes, no? She's serving God and her kid dies. Do you think that some people would react by saying, I don't understand this? Now that I'm doing something really for God, now I've got a death situation. Does it ever happen that people get frustrated in our day? Yeah. And so what happens is the woman's reaction, she's upset about it, and God's using it to just, so God is going to work. Question is, how does God do this? How does the prophet? And so we read, which we're not going to get through yet, and it says that, my thinking, she's upset, she's mourning, she's making statements that are blunt and harsh, revealing her heart. Has she given up on Jehovah? I don't think so, but she's going through a crisis. And he says, give me your son. He took him into his bosom, carried him into his alaya, where he abode, laid him upon his own bed, and he says, O Lord my God, have you also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son? Does the prophet understand fully? Yes or no? He doesn't. And then what does he ask God to do? Bring him back to life. When has this happened in history up to this point? Never. He is asking God in prayer to do something that has never, ever, ever, ever yet happened. Wow. Let's pick up next week right there.